Hello, everyone. And of course, this is Unfound Alive. What date is the day? It's June 23rd of 2025. I hope everybody is having a great June. As you can see, if you are watching this live on Monday night, that I am still here in Pennsylvania seeing my dad. I'm going to be going back to Florida on Friday. So I'll leave Friday morning. As long as there aren't any problems, I will get back to Florida Friday night. Depending on when I leave here, usually takes about 16 and a half hours, but that is the plan. And that means I've been seeing my dad for 2 weeks, which is what I told him I would do. I would stay up here for a couple weeks until close to the end of June. And could maybe put it off a couple more days, but driving on weekends, it's always way busier. Next Monday, of course, got to do a show, and by next Tuesday, it's at some point I got to go back to where I actually live. So it's going to be this Friday. He's cool with that. He knows that I have things to do, and I live there. He lives here. He could come down and see me, but he gets bored fairly quickly down there. Whereas up here, he has all these places he knows he can drive, and he has friends up here and everything. Down there, not much of anything. So I'll be going back the end of this week. So by the next time you see me for a live show, it will be back to the condo in Clearwater Beach. As you are watching tonight, I hope you will give this fantastic show that I've lined up for you. I hope you will give it a thumbs up. I hope you will subscribe to this channel if you're not a subscriber already. If you'd like to support what we do here at Unfound, there are a variety of ways to do that. Patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, which is on the screen right now. You can also go to paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. You can, if you're watching on YouTube, you can go below, hit the join button. Or in particular, if you are taking part in tonight's chat, you can hit the super chat button below the chat, and you can contribute to what we do here that way as well. Like I've already stated, I have a fantastic show lined up for all of you tonight. Chris, we're going to talk about a heist that has seemingly been solved. Nobody's gone to court or anything yet, but I want to talk about Barry Morphew. He's back in the news. Maybe a lot of you know that already. And then also, I've been meaning to talk about this flight, Air India Flight 171 that crashed in India. It's been, a couple weeks now? And it was on the agenda for last week. Didn't get to it, but I am going to get to it tonight. I take an interest in these. I would call it a morbid fascination with them. And if you're into that, maybe you've been going to some YouTube channels, maybe reading things about what could have happened. I will attempt to put it in layman's terms. As a person who knows a lot about plane crashes, I'm not a pilot, never wanted to be a pilot. I don't even like flying, but I do take an interest in the investigations. And as I've said many times before, I think you can learn a lot about investigating disappearances by looking at investigations for airplane crashes. And maybe I'll get to that when that is the topic for tonight, when I get to that in the next couple of hours. And of course, I got some other things that I may or may not get to. As you know, I always come to the microphone. And tonight, if I sound a little different, it's because I'm just using the microphone off of my MacBook Air here, simply because I'm kind of limited in space. I think I went through this description last week. Kind of limited in my space in this part of the room. So I'm keeping the microphone out of the way and just using the microphone. Just not quite as clear, but I'm sure you all can understand me. So who is in here tonight? We got D. D, you are in way early. Hello, Deborah. Derek, I don't often catch your live videos. Well, Derek, I'm happy you're here tonight. Good to see you. Thanks for making the time. Amy, fishing. Lisa, what's going on? Good evening to you. Neighborly. Derek says, I live in the Pittsburgh area. It's very hot. Oh, yeah, man. It does seem that I brought my Florida weather to Pennsylvania. And the thing is, it's been hot and it's rained a lot. And it hasn't rained the last couple days, but up here in Renfrew, and if you're all wondering where that is, I think I went through this last year. Once again, not touching politics, but my dad lives about a half mile away from where there was attempted assassination on Donald Trump. He lives about a half mile away. In fact, I was driving up here to see my dad when that happened that day back in August of last year. So that's where I am. And it was a beautiful day, but it was like 97 degrees and even hotter than that with a heat index and however they calculate those things. And so it's been really unusual weather. And I have gotten to throw the discs a little bit, but not a lot. But my dad and I did go out today. So yeah, Derek, you're totally right. It's been very hot here. Hello, Michelle. Dean saying, oh, how cute, people saying it's hot. Well, D, being that I'm hearing Derek saying that, it was 97 today. So I realize you're out there in Oklahoma and you think it's funny. But for June in Pennsylvania, it's been a little ugly out there. Hello, Helen. How are you? Good to see you. Hope you enjoy the show tonight. So what's been going on with me since the last time we got together? Well, Dad and I doing a lot of hanging out. I haven't watched a ton of TV with him. We've caught some Jeopardy. We've caught some Wheel of Fortune, caught some Family Feud. He's sat through some soccer with me. He's a soccer fan, but only if it's really, really good soccer, like Spain versus Portugal or something. But he's sat through that with me. We've watched some pirate games, and I think he enjoys that at least a little bit more. So we try to balance it out between what he likes, what I like. So there's been that. We've gone for drives. Today we went on this fantastic drive. We left here about 9:30 in the morning, and we went up. My parents used to own a camp right along the Allegheny River, north of East Brady. And if you're like, well, what the hell is East Brady? That's where the quarterback, Hall of Fame quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, Jim Kelly, is from. If you didn't know, from East Brady, Pennsylvania, very small town up there. And they had a camp up there. So we went up there. We drove past the old camp. They haven't owned it since maybe the early 90s or something like that. But I can remember going up there, taking my three-wheeler. There's some like strip mines that were abandoned. I'd ride my three-wheeler up in there. I'd be gone for hours riding around up there. So we went up there, checked that out right along the Allegheny River. And then we were back on these gravel roads. We didn't even know where we are. I didn't have phone service, going on roads that neither of us had been on before. But we ended up back down at the Allegheny River, but more north of where the camp was or is, but we don't own it anymore. So we got up there. My dad took some pictures and we made a day of it. I guess we were out for like 4 hours or something riding around. And then on the way back, we stopped in West Katanning and had lunch. And then we got home and I started working on the live show. Then I took like a 15-minute snooze. And I was actually watching some Pirate baseball before the live show got started. I was corresponding with a longtime listener of Unfound through email, back and forth for a little while. So that's what my day was like. But, we've gone on some other drives since you all saw me last. But what happened on Saturday night was really, really cool. My buddy Brad Carastori, who I've known like it seems forever, He was the guy who lived in Las Vegas. We grew up together. He was 2 years ahead of me at Leechburg. He moved to Vegas in 96. I moved there in 98. I lived with him and his future wife for about 8 months or something like that. And then I got my own place. And, Brad and I, very close. I, of course, moved to Florida in 2011. He moved back here to Pennsylvania in 2013. Well, he's a musician. He's been doing a lot of gigs with a variety of bands and by himself over the last several months. And very conveniently, he was playing at a place only about 10 to 15 minutes from where my dad lives here. So it was fantastic. And what happened was, Dad, I went, and I was thinking, well, I'm just going to see Brad. And he's playing with a guy. They do an acoustic sets with also a guy that I know. His name is Aaron. But I get there, and I got surprised that Brad's youngest brother, Todd, who lives in Ohio now, he was there, and I haven't seen him for a while. And then on top of that, Doug, who was in my class in high school, and we've been best friends since, even though we didn't go to the same elementary schools, it seems like it was since elementary school. That's how long it is. He ended up being there as well, and it was a surprise. So I go walking in there thinking I'm just going to see Brad and Aaron, and then there's Todd, and then there's Doug. So it was fantastic. It was fantastic night. And of course, my dad knows all of them very well. In fact, my dad taught Aaron in school, in junior high school. And so it was just one big, fantastic night. We took some pictures. I posted them on my personal Facebook page. Maybe you've seen them. And it was just so good. And Doug lives in North Carolina. So he drove up here for a few days to see Brad. And I think he came up because he knew I was going to be here, and he surprised me. And then Todd comes over, and so it was all. We got a great picture. All would that be? Me, Doug, Brad, Todd, Aaron, my dad. So 6 guys. We got all 6 guys in a picture. It's a really good picture. I was wearing my Dio shirt. It was just a fantastic night. I mean, just totally. I mean, it was going to be good anyway to see Brad, see him play, see Aaron. I mean, that was good. But when that all happened, it was just so crazy. So crazy. And if you remember Doug, maybe some of you, if you go way back, Doug flew down to Florida in 2019, and he and I went to see Iron Maiden down near Miami, if any of you remember that trip. And that was his first and I think only time seeing Iron Maiden. And we had a great time back then too. So it was all good. And so it was a really, really special night. And I think, we had a great time, and these things just don't happen that often these days because we're all spread out, with Todd in Ohio, Brad here in this area, Doug in North Carolina, me in Florida. I mean, how are you supposed to put all that together? But it happened. So that was fantastic. And every time I'm with all of them, I'm reminded of how great of people, they are. They aren't just my best friends like forever, and 3 of them brothers being my best friends. I mean, that's pretty unusual, but just being great guys. They love my dad. They love the stories my dad tells and everything. And unfortunately, both of their parents are deceased now. Their mother died actually the same year my mother died too. And my mother and their mother were best friends in high school, and they graduated high school together. I mean, it's so crazy. But it's just such a great, really positive atmosphere. And they love hearing my dad tell stories, and he just cracks them up and everything. So it was all so good. And the music was good as well. Brad and Aaron doing a very nice job doing acoustic sets, electric acoustic, and doing a lot of 80s and 90s music, and it's good, kind of acoustic takes on a lot of songs that many of you know. Let's just put it that way. So that happened on Saturday night, And it was just crazy. D, Thunder won the NBA. My nephews would have been sad, so I know he would have been so happy. I don't know what that means, D. Amy, unexpected reunion. Yes, Amy, absolutely, totally surprised. And the funny thing is, while I was driving up here, I was texting with Doug. He never mentioned he was coming to Pennsylvania. It was crazy. Hello, Lighting. What's going on? And Fishing says, you remember the Iron Maiden story with Doug? Okay, yeah, you Fishing, you've been around long enough. Yeah. In other news, this is something that I mentioned on the podcast on Friday, but I'm going to just mention it again because it's hilarious. My hometown of Leechburg is celebrating its 175th anniversary this summer, and there's a guy who is running a trivia contest every day on Leechburg's page, like trivia about the town of Leechburg, and I was a question. And it had to do with me working at Star Trek. It said something to the effect of Edward Denzel, Leechburg High graduate, 1989, ended up working in what show in Las Vegas? It's so crazy. It's so crazy when I noticed that. And I actually ended up talking to the guy who actually puts the trivia together, and just it was a good conversation, but did not expect that. I don't know if my life, of course, there have been a lot of fantastic people out of Leechburg. We have a gold medal winner, all-star baseball player. We have a guy who, ended up starting a very well-known financial firm. He was like in my mother's class going back to the 50s. We've had some notable people, come from Leechburg. I don't know if I'm notable. Maybe unique. I mean, I'm surely the only person from Leechburg ever, I think, who ever performed in a Vegas show. So that guess makes me unique, but it's not like I was the star of the show or anything. I mean, so it's kind of funny and stuff, but I still made sure everybody knew about it. So that happened. I meant to mention that last week. Got mentioned on the podcast, and now I'm mentioning it again. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, this is on my mind now because I'm about to answer this question that I forgot to answer last week. But if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer during the live show tonight, just put them right in the chat, and I guarantee that I will get to it. Doesn't have to be disappearance related. I'll answer it as long as it's not too personal and it's PG rated. All right. So that's the only criteria. Anything that's on your mind you'd like to ask me. Once again, me, I stay away from the controversial stuff, politics, religion, things. But if you have anything like that, you let me know. Because here's the question that I didn't get to last week. And I told the person I was going to answer it during the live show last week, and I forgot because I didn't put it in my notes. And that's my fault. The question that and I did end up messaging the person and did end up answering the question, by the way. I don't want to think I left this person hanging for another week. But the question was, of course, most of you know my general musical taste. I think my musical taste is much more diverse than all of you realize. Really, the only hard rule I have is I don't listen to country music. If it's classical, if it's pop, I don't even mind some electric dance music and disco and everything. Country music. So this listener asked me, well, what is my guilty pleasure song? So something that is outside of the normal genre that I listen to, but is something maybe to me that I like that, maybe is a little bit embarrassing. Can I answer that question? And I decided, yes, I can answer that question. And technically it's 2 songs. I only gave her one answer, but I will tell you the answer. And then I came up with another one, but the other one's going to need an explanation. The guilty pleasure song that I would say maybe is representative of this, and is the song Hunter by Dido. How many of you know that song? It came out maybe 1999, something like that. Of course, I think Dido's more known for that song, Thank You. But her song, Hunter, I think it's from the same album. It came out around the same time. I don't know. It's always stuck with me. You can go find it on Spotify or Apple Music or iTunes or YouTube or whatever. It's everywhere. It's everywhere you want to be. But it's a song about a woman who's in a relationship, but she is longing to be single again. And that's why it's called Hunter. It's a fascinating song, and it's from the first time I'd heard. I can remember listening to that when I worked at Star Trek, so over 20 years ago. And so it would be like right when it came out, something like that. From the first time I heard it, well, this is an interesting song, and it's just kind of stuck with me. So I would say that is one of my guilty pleasure songs. All right, just between me and all of you. Now, the other song, though, I think that I have to explain, because this is there's a funny story. There's kind of a funny story behind this. Is that back when I lived in Las Vegas, I had a membership to the Las Vegas Athletic Club, which is a franchised, gym around Las Vegas. When I lived there, maybe there were 4 or 5 locations, something like that. And back at the time, this is just kind of when might have even been before. So this might be almost 20 years ago, probably 20 years ago. This is before iPhones came out and Android phones came out. And so what was big at the time was, of course, there being a lot of screens in the gym and playing like music and videos and things like that. Of course, I don't live there. I don't know what they do now. I haven't lived there since 2011. But it seems to me, given that everybody's gone to their phones and likes to listen to music on headphones and can watch things, I'm guessing a lot of gyms have gotten away with that. But at the time, that was a big thing. And I can remember being there, and this video came on. And I was watching it, and I'm like, did somebody flip this over to like porn or something? Did somebody flip this over? Granted, these women were not naked, but. And I'm watching, what is going on here? I'm looking around. It's truth. Honest to God truth. This is what happened. I'm watching and I'm like, well, this is really, really strange. But the song has kept with me since I first saw it. And so this is another one of my guilty pleasure songs that I'm going to admit to you all now. Now see, this one might not be as well known as Hunter by Dido. I don't know if the song where it went on the charts. The group that did it like came and went like that, whereas Dido's still around and I think tours and everything. But this group was like here and it was gone. But this song has really stuck with me. And the song is, you're going to laugh. This is going to be hilarious. And once you go find the video, you'll see what I'm talking about. Granted, they were all actual adults. Just so if you go watch that video, just want to understand that. But the group was Girlicious, and the song was Let's Do Some Stupid SHIT. Now, how many of you know that song? If you don't, you can go find it. I have to admit, that song is, I can't remember the last time I watched the video, because you have to remember at the time when I was watching, I was like 35. Well, now I'm 54, and it's a little weird now. But at the time, I was like, what is going on here? And you can look that one up. And I have to admit that that song has stuck with me a little bit as well. So that's another guilty pleasure song. Girlicious, and I think they came from a reality show. That's how that group got put together, from a reality show. And their song was called Let's Do Some Stupid SHIT. So there you go. Yes, Mandy, the outfits, exactly. TD saying, Mandy says the ending lyric such a good line. Let me leave, let me go. Yes, from Hunter. Yes, yes. D says, oh man, no country music. Well, no, D. Sorry, Derek. I'm not a country fan either. It doesn't gel with me. Neither me, Derek. You're right. It's great lyrics in that song, Mandy. Hunter. Well, now Ed, I do know that song. All right, D, very good. Charlie, how you doing, buddy? Good to see your mother tomorrow, by the way, and your Uncle Michael. I saw Uncle Michael, by the way, last week as well. He came up. He's doing well. Not even I'm familiar with that. All right, all of you are going to have to check that out. Anybody listen to this podcast when it comes out tomorrow, they're all going to be scrambling. What are these songs? What is this Girlicious song? What is that video? Well, you can go check it out. And Mandy, yes, the outfits. Exactly, Mandy. And I just looked up the other one. Yeah, I'm sure you did, D. And if you're all wondering what my guilty pleasure movie is, it's Get It On, that cheerleading movie. So if you're wondering, hope that, once again, I hope that doesn't reveal too much about me. But any movie that's going to make fun of cheerleading, sign me up. Sign me up. Kirsten Dunst and the jazz fingers or jazz hands or whatever they do. Alicia Dishku, and it's fantastic. It's just a fantastic. It when it's on, I have to watch it. It makes me laugh every time, and it's so good. It's just so good. Making fun of cheerleaders is always going to be an important part of my life. I don't know why. Gabrielle Union, yes, Mandy. Gabrielle Union. George, hey, George. Former co-worker George from the Greek Owl. George, what's going on? Great movie, Bring It On. Yes, George. George knows. Good to see you, George. Thanks for stopping in tonight. Good to see you. George, I've known George about 20 years now. We worked in a Rat Pack show and a magic show together. Good to see you. I was thinking the Spice Girls, not the Spice Girls. DeMarian, love the pictures in the back wall. Yeah, those are that's a picture collage that my mother actually put together years and years and years and years and years ago, that hangs in this second bedroom where I sleep when I'm up here in Pennsylvania. Yes, that there, you can see it right there. And of course, if you can make it screen, you might be able to make out some of the pictures. Thanks, George. That's very kind. Mary Jane, what's going on? Good to see you. Good to see you. So let's get to why we're actually all here tonight. Now that I've maybe said too much about some of my private passions and likings, I'm going to go right to Flight 171 because I missed it last week. But as you know, when I put things in the title, you know I'm guaranteed to get to them. So I will get to the heist being solved and the Barry Morphew situation, and I have some other things that I like to touch upon. But Flight 171, this was a flight that left India, and it was actually headed to England. And upon takeoff, it only got to about 600 feet in the air. If you've seen the videos, of course, if you're very sensitive to such things, then I would stay away. But it took off, got up to about 600 feet, of course, not that high. And then it just started dropping down. It didn't tilt a wing. It didn't flip over. It didn't go nose into the ground, anything like that. It got up, if you're watching the screen, and kind of just, it seemed to have glided back down to the ground, almost as if it were landing. I mean, it really did look like it was landing again, but of course it wasn't landing. And it crashed into some buildings. and everybody but one person on board got killed. And of course, any plane crash of that magnitude is going to get a lot of attention. But the reason the reason it's gotten so much attention, though, is because it's the first Boeing 787 that has crashed ever. And of course, Boeing 787s, how long have they been out? 10 years, 12 years, 15 years? I've never ridden on one, so not sure. But it's been a while. And so they've gone several years without any crashes since they got into the commercial fleet. This is the first one where a plane got destroyed and people got killed. There have been some things where some technical things have gone wrong. There were some growing pains with it early on with some electrical issues and things, but no crashes. So this is the first one. And here we are about, a couple weeks later, and still the public we don't even have a preliminary report. The best guess at this point. I think they've gotten the data recorders, and surely they've been listened to or viewed or analyzed, but so far nothing has been announced. Is this unusual? Little bit. I think when you look back to, of course, those crashes that earlier this year, the crash we had in Washington, D.C., 2 weeks after that, everybody had a pretty good idea about what happened. We had the calls, the calls to the tower. I think some preliminary understandings the public knew about, but this still seems to be a bit of a mystery, a little unusual. Now, if this crash had taken place in Russia or in being that Iran's been in the news and some other countries, North Korea, then yes, that would not be unusual. But India, it's at least a little unusual, maybe because this is the first crash of that type of jet. Maybe that has something to do with it. I'm not alleging a cover-up or anything like that, but it does seem to me, the way I understand all these investigations, it seems to be a little slow. So all I want to do is go through what probably are the main possibilities regarding this. And most importantly, I don't want any of you to fear flying because of this. All right. That is totally, totally, totally irrational. Do not think because of what happened in Washington, D.C. Of course, we had this other jet that crashed in Philadelphia. And then you see this and it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Please don't think that way. Please don't. Now, is this crash unusual? Yeah, it is. The reason it's unusual is that usually this would not be so unusual if this was like a private little propeller plane or something and you have some amateur pilot or something. Those kinds of crashes happen a lot. Taking off and landing, the most dangerous times in an airplane, if there's going to be any danger. And of course, if you're an amateur up there who's only going up once a week, you're in the most dangerous phase of flight. If you make a mistake, you go into the ground. This is when most of these things happen, landing and taking off. But for a commercial jet to crash in what seemed to be pretty good weather conditions, sunny, no rain, no wind, no snow, unusual. That it crashed just wings level, certainly unusual as well. Now, you might be thinking, well, is there anything like this? Well, you could look at the crash, a very famous crash, coincidentally, from Washington, D.C. back in 1981 or something, with Air Florida, that plane that took off and only got up to a certain level of flight. Then it dropped down, crashed into that bridge, and there's a very famous video of them trying to rescue people from the water. Maybe if some of you have seen that on YouTube from over 40 years ago. And what happened there is the pilots, for some reason, didn't de-ice the wings. They didn't have the de-icer on, and so the wings had ice on them, and it doesn't take a lot of ice to ruin a wing. And so they were trying to take off. The wings were fouled because of the air has to be perfect running over them, or you're not going to get lift. The ice messes that up. They couldn't get enough lift. They dropped back down. And of course, most of the people got killed in that one. Of course, the big difference is that there was no ice in India. But if you look at that crash back then and this one, they do seem to be similar, because that crash from back in the early 80s, same thing. It couldn't get any lift, and it might have turned a little bit or anything, but it didn't like go nose down into the water, into the bridge, or upside down or anything. It was pretty much wings level when it was going down. So for some reason, the wings on that jet in India were not generating enough lift for some reason. Now, what they've also discovered, if you've had the stomach to watch the videos, there's one where you kind of are seeing it. The plane is flying away. You're on the right. You're looking. The point of view is from the right side of the plane. You're looking up at it, and it's flying away. There's one like from almost right behind it, but the one I'm talking about is you're viewing it, and it's up in the air, and it's moving like away and right across the screen, and of course it's dropping. What you notice in that video is you'll hear this weird sound, and it sounds like a propeller. And every commercial jet has a propeller, and it pops out. It's called a rat. It's called a rat, R-A-T, capital R-A-T. It stands for something that I'm not thinking of right at this second. But that pops out automatically when the engines lose power. Now, can the pilots manually engage that? Yes, they can. And it's something that just pops out right from the bottom, like 2/3 of the way back on the plane, or halfway back. It pops out, and it just looks like a propeller you'd see on a little plane at your little local airport. And it spins really, really fast, and it sounds like a propeller, and it generates electricity, so the pilots can at least have some electronics for their gauges and everything else. It does not generate any power. Okay, it's not powerful enough to keep the plane in the air. All it's doing is generating some electricity for just the primary systems only. What you notice in that video, and you can hear it too, that propeller is out and it is spinning as fast as it can spin. So something happened in which the engines weren't generating any power. Of course, if the engines aren't generating any power, then there's going to be no lift, which means the plane is going to start to drop. But at the same time, due to the power systems on the plane, this propeller thing will drop out, generating electricity. It seems that that's what happened. That this plane the engines were fine going down the runway. It accelerated, it took off, and then for some reason, both engines cut out. And of course, when the engines cut out, you lose all electronics. You lose, the jets run everything. So for some reason, that happened. That the engines, both of them, there's two, stopped working. That caused the jet to not have any lift, got up to about 600 some feet, and then it just started coming back down. Once again, to the layman, it looks like the plane is landing. Of course, it wasn't. This is very, very unusual. For two engines to go out on takeoff simultaneously is as rare as you ever want to talk about regarding a jet. Pilots practice for one engine going out. But, in the simulator, you're taking off, one of them blows up or something, ingests a bird or throws a blade or whatever else. They practice for that. But they don't practice for both engines going out, because it's kind of useless. Because if both engines go out on takeoff, there's really not much the pilots can do. It's gravity's taking over. They have limited control. And wherever that plane is going to hit on the ground, that's where it's going. It really, for the most part, can't be stopped. It's 600 feet. If all you get up is to like 600 feet, you're dropping, you're going to hit the ground pretty fast, as you saw in that video. So we're talking about something that is very, 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 very rare, which may be the reason that, 2 weeks later, we're still, there's not even a decent preliminary report on this. Now, what could cause that? I would rule out, they brought up, of course, one thing that could cause it would be fuel contamination. The problem is a lot of planes where jets were taking off that day, this is the only one it happened to. So it seems that jet fuel problem would seem to be very, 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 very unlikely. Of course, another possibility was, did the engine stop because there was no fuel in the jet? That also seems very, very, now, if it were landing and ran out of fuel, that would maybe be possible. Miscalculation or a leak or something. But I'm taking off. No way. No way. No, there's just no way that could be. Now, could it be a mistake? Could it be that for some reason, one of the pilots, as they were taking off, pulled back on the throttles, both engines to idle or shut them off or something? Certainly possible. I mean, that's a huge mistake. Is it possible? Is it conceivable? Yes, it's physically possible to do that. Is it possible? Well, we have to acknowledge there have been some pilot suicides over the years. We had that German Wings one, where the guy, locked the other pilot out of the cockpit and flew. Was it France or Switzerland, Germany, somewhere in there? Did that. So we had, an Egyptian Air flight back in about 99 or something, where a pilot certainly did that. So this happens. Is this still a possibility? Yeah. Not very common, but yeah. But I think what they're looking at, if I had to guess, is some sort, and this is the scary part. Of course, they've not grounded any 787s. They're all still flying out there. I think if they really, really, really thought something was wrong, I think they would ground them or something like that. And that's happened before. We remember with the 737 MAX, when both of those crashed several years ago, all of those planes got grounded until they figured that all out. And then going way, way, way back to when the DC-10 came out, it had some issues with doors flying off and causing crashes. They grounded those for a while. So it does happen. But they've not done this with the 787. But my guess is they're unfortunately looking at some sort of electrical issue, some fault by a computer, that when the jet was taking off, that for some reason, maybe the computer thought the plane was still on the ground or something like that, and the computer shut off the engines, but this wasn't done by the pilots. Is this possible? Yeah, it is. Once again, I don't know what happened, but this is going to be something that is unique. Now, even if it's a pilot suicide, it's unique. If it's a computer issues that cause it, it's really, 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 really unique. But really, there aren't that many possibilities. There really aren't. To think that both engines had malfunctions that shut them off at the same time is just not possible. I mean, maybe thinking, well, what What about the miracle on the Hudson, with Sully? They take off, they fly into those birds. Both those engines went out. And of course, he landed it in the Hudson River. Everybody alive. One of the spectacular displays of airmanship that has ever been done. Absolutely miracle. Well, the issue with that, though, is he did hit birds. There's no proof, even from the video. There's nothing showing that there were birds in the way of the jet when it took off. Birds can really mess engines up, but there's no signs of that. So it's still a bit of a mystery, but I want all of you to understand that it can only be a few things. But I'm thinking at this point that it is something that they've never seen before, and that's why it's taking so long. Could it be a situation where they're figuring out by looking for, like I said, they already have the cockpit voice recorder, they already have the data recorder, they can look at these things. And so they already have an idea of what was going on with all of its systems at the time. And it very well could be they're looking at the data and saying, this can't have happened, but it did. But it did. We might think about, maybe we could go back to that American Airlines flight in Chicago from the late 70s. Very famous photo of the plane crashing. It's not hit the ground yet, but one of its engines are missing. Maybe some of you are familiar with that photo. And of course, that was a crash on takeoff as well. But what happened? It was a maintenance issue. They had taken that engine off and they were shortcutting it. And over time, this was actually damaging part of the wing that held the engine to the wing. And eventually, that part gave way just as it was taking off. That engine falls off and, it goes right into the ground. And all those people were killed on the plane and some were killed on the ground. Rare. That's the only time that's ever happened. So this is kind of what we're looking at with Flight 171, Air India. But I don't want any of you to be fearful of flying because of it. Okay? Not worth it. Not worth having the fear. Not worth it. You getting in your car and driving on the street, wherever you're going, to Starbucks, to work, to the gym, to your daughter's softball game, whatever it may be, that is way more dangerous than getting on any commercial flight in the United States. Now, are there some countries where I would say maybe you don't want to get? Yes. But even in those countries, they don't have that many crashes. Their crash record is much worse than the United States, but even in those countries, the odds of you eventually being on a jet that crashes in one of these questionable countries, it's still very rare. Still very rare. We have countries where pilots fake credentials and all sorts of crazy things. So there's no reason to be afraid. And my thing would be, if you are afraid, I think that you just need to continue to educate yourself and find out, what the facts are about these things. I think the reason a lot of people fear flying is because they have imaginations. Their creative side starts running crazy and they start having all these visual, horrible ideas. And it's just not very probable. Yes, planes crash. Yeah, they do. And if you don't ever want to get on a plane again because of that, well, then probably there are a lot of other things you shouldn't be doing in your life either. That's the way you need to look at it. Derek says there was a Malaysian flight. Yeah, Flight 370. I think the pilot intentionally flew the plane off course into the Indian Ocean where it eventually ran out of fuel. Derek, that is a popular opinion, but I have to tell you, I don't think that's what happened. If you don't know Derek, I covered that way back at the beginning of Unfound's existence. Summer of 2017, I had Jeff Wise on to talk about that. He continues to be an authority on the crash, even though his particular theory is, well, let's just say it's in the minority. That's putting it nicely. But People have been round and round and round about that flight and what happened. But you have to remember, Derek, they've done a ton of searching using all sort of statistical analysis and pings and satellites and everything else. They've been all over the southern Indian Ocean. They haven't found anything. So just keep that in mind. Hello, lighting. Rockford, my first thought was maintenance, but I get your point about it being rare. Flying to Seattle on Thursday, more worried about the Uber ride to Burbank. Exactly. You're taking off from the Burbank airport, Bob Hope Airport. Been to that airport many times back in the day, Rockford. One of the few American airports where you still get off the plane using the stairs. You actually get off and you're outside. And also what I remember about that airport is that the baggage claim and everything is also outside. I think the airport in Hawaii is like that as well, but I think those are the only two airports I've ever been to where where you get your luggage is actually outside. Of course, there's roofs, but it's actually outside. A lot of good memories of Burbank Airport going back 2003 to 2004, Rockford. A lot of very short flights from Las Vegas down there, like less than an hour. Burbank Airport is a pretty cool airport. It's right there in the middle of, everything, and just squeezed it in there. Of the LA airports, it's certainly my favorite. Derek, I'll have to check out the 2017 video you mentioned. Yeah, please do. Please do. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, and it's right here on this YouTube channel if you want to find it. That and Long Beach are my faves. Easy as getting on a train. Yeah. Yep, Long Beach, Orange County, LAX, all those. Been through all of them, but Burbank, very special to me. So that's Flight 171. When will we have a preliminary report? As you probably know by now, anytime like this, the final report usually takes a couple years. Should it take a couple years? Probably not. But it does. No matter if it happens in the United States or, in India. Even with like what happened in Washington, D.C., you have to remember everybody kind of understands what happened, but you have to understand the NTSB, the official report will not be out this year, and it might not even be out next year. So of course, a lot of people talking about it, and being that it's in one of the busiest areas of the United States, the capital of the United States, is going to get a lot of attention, and a lot of people are going to be coming forward with their experiences of flying in and out. So that's how a lot of information gets to the public. We have to remember that's not official. We won't get the official report for a while. RK, a bit further, but Palm Springs International. Been to Palm Springs, never flown to Palm Springs. D says, I'm still scared of planes. Sorry, but I even went with my ex-son-in-law to Dallas-Fort Worth in his airplane. Okay. No. That's fine by me, D. I'm still scared of him. Okay. All right. Maybe I just need to keep working on that. Now, where do I want to go next? Let's go to this heist being solved. Now, what heist am I talking about? This is one, it's really weird. It seems maybe within the last couple months, I think I might have even mentioned this on a live show that, whatever happened regarding that heist of that Brinks truck that happened in California where all of that jewelry got stolen. All of you remember that? Remember that the truck was in Northern California at a jewelry show, and all of this jewelry got loaded onto this truck, and it was going back down to LA, something like that. It's going to be here in the article. And then the drivers pulled in. One was sleeping. The other one went in to go to the bathroom, get something to eat. When he came back out, he discovered that the back of the truck had been opened, and I don't think all of it, but a lot of the jewelry was gone. And such a brazen heist that, it's almost like something right out of a movie. And so perfectly timed, just when that guy happens to be inside, the other guy's sleeping. And I think a lot of people thought, and me too, is that this had to be some kind of inside job, right? Well, it seems not. It seems like this was not an inside job, because if you start looking at these kinds of heists, it is amazing how many of them are inside jobs because of a driver, because of some employee, at the security company. Even when we go back to the heist that is depicted in the movie Goodfellas, that was an inside job by some security guy that worked at the airport. He just kind of let the robbers in to do what they were going to do. That was an inside job. Very common. But it seems this one, even though it has all the signs of being one, isn't. Let me read it to you. It was a jewelry heist days in the making, one allegedly planned by thieves who had worked their way up to a major score after honing their covert craft in the parking lots and truck stops of San Bernardino County, county I've been to many times. When they broke into the Brinks Big Rig at a remote Grapevine truck stop in the dead of night 3 years ago, the men may have gotten more than they bargained for. A haul that could be worth up to $100 million. That would make the theft of 24 bags containing jewelry, gems, watches, and other precious items on July 2nd of 2022, so almost 3 years ago, among the biggest heists of all time. All of this is according to an indictment unsealed Tuesday a week ago, by federal prosecutors in LA against 7 co-conspirators who allegedly carried out the theft at the Flying J Travel Center in, Lebec, California. The men were each charged with conspiracy to commit theft from interstate and foreign shipment, and also theft from interstate and foreign shipment. Some face additional charges. In all, 14 jewelers whose merchandise Brinks was transporting to Pasadena were victimized that day. Several suffered grave financial losses, and some left the trade altogether. The merchants, many of whom are based in LA, have been locked in a years-long legal battle with Brinks over the value of their pilfered goods. Well, why? Let me get to that right now, and then we'll get to these guys and actually what was going on here. Well, as you would imagine, these jewelers are dealing with items worth a lot of money. But there's also the fact that the odds of them being stolen is very, 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 very low, even though it happened in this case. Still, it's very low odds that anything is ever going to be stolen. Jewelry is getting shipped all over the world all the time. There are actually very few heists, especially in the United States. So what do? They undervalue the jewelry, because the odds of them actually having to use the insurance is actually very, very low. They don't, to keep it cheap, they undervalue the items. Well, what's going on now is, this stuff did get stolen, and now all of these people are trying to collect on the insurance for the amount that the stuff was actually worth. So, for example, all of the stuff was worth $10 million. Well, they only insured it for $1 million because they're trying to be cheap, because they think, the odds of getting it stolen are low anyway. But it does get stolen. Well, they're trying to collect $10 million. So, of course, the jewelers had nothing to do with the heist, but it does seem, they made their own bed and they have to sleep. And of course, they're going to try to sue Brinks, saying, you didn't adequately protect the jewelers enough. It's a long legal battle, but that's what it's talking about here when it says the merchants, many of whom are based in LA, have been locked in a years-long legal battle with Brinks over the value of their pilfered goods. That's what I'm talking about. Some of the stolen jewelry, including watches, were recovered after search warrants were executed Tuesday. Authorities also recovered a large amount of cash. Butler said search warrants are still being pursued, and much of the stolen jewels remain missing. But Akil Davis, assistant director in charge of the FBI's LA field office, that's where Johnny Utah was stationed, said he was gratified that we can finally begin to give answers to the victims of this massive theft and deliver them a measure of justice by holding these defendants accountable. Two of the defendants arrested are expected to appear in federal court on Tuesday. Another is an inmate at an Arizona prison, so the guy's already in jail. The men's ages range from 31 to 60. The men are all LA area residents, hailing from neighborhoods such as Boyle Heights, Westlake, and Rampart Village. Their names are Carlos Victor Menstanza Sicardo, Jazeel Padilla Resto, Pablo Raul Lugo Lorig, Victor Hugo, Valencia Soloranzo, Jorge Enrique Albon, Jason Nalon, Priscila Flores, and Eduardo Macias Ibarra. Some of the defendants have also been charged with smaller heights throughout San Bernardino County. Hello, Jennifer and Chime. How are you? Or is it Kime? How are you doing tonight? Good to see you. Their planning of the Brinks heist allegedly began at the International Gem and Jewelry Show in San Mateo, where starting on July 8th, 2022, jewelers displayed their baubles in booths under the glare of fluorescent light. Prosecutors allege that Padilla spent days casing out the show. On July 10th, Mastanza, Lugo, and Elbon allegedly scouted the Brinks semi-truck, which was loaded with 73 bags containing the jewels. When the big rig departed the San Mateo County Event Center that night, it touched off a complex choreography that culminated at an I-5 truck stop about 70 miles north of LA. Rockford, I'm going to guess you've been by there. This account is drawn from the indictment and previous reportings by the Times. The semi-truck's departure from the event center started around 8:25 p.m., and it triggered a series of phone calls among some of the defendants. Through the night, several of them allegedly followed the southbound Brinks truck, which was piloted by one driver while another dozed in the vehicle's sleeping compartment. It traveled on the I-5 for about 300 miles, pausing at a rest area in Buttonwillow before pulling into the Lebec truck stop at 2:05 a.m. on July 11th. When the driver left the semi-truck to get a meal inside the Flying J, the thieves made their move. They'd have 27 minutes to pull off the heist. Let me scroll down here. All right, hold on. Let me see here. I kind of messed up the copying of this. At 2:32 a.m., the Brinks driver who was dining in the Flying J returned to his vehicle and noticed its rear lock had been cut away. A little before 4 a.m., two LA County Sheriff's deputies responded to a vehicle burglary call for service at the truck stop, whose parking lot was filled with 18-wheelers. I'm pretty sure we were followed from the show when we got loaded, the driver said. And there is body camera footage of these interviews. Within days of the theft, the scale of the crime came into view. It quickly drew comparisons to infamous heists from across the decades, among them the Brinks Matte gold bullion job at Heathrow, the 2003 Antwerp diamond theft, and 2015's Hatton Garden burglary, in which thieves tunneled into a vault in London's jewelry district. The heist has captivated LA's jewelry industry, whose epicenter is St. Vincent Court, a bricked alley in downtown where jewelers congregate to trade gossip between sips of espresso. Every time I get somebody asking me, so Gene, whatever happened with your jewelry? And he always answers, we don't know anything. The affected jewelers occupy a humble corner. Okay. Let's see. And they go on to talk about the legal skirmishing, the lawsuit that I've already discussed. Let me scroll down here. Now, the thing about it was these thieves had done a lot of other heists, so it very well could be the police were onto them already. In the months leading up to the Brinks heist, several of the co-conspirators allegedly pulled off a series of thefts in San Bernardino County. In some cases, the crimes relied on tactics similar to those later used at the Flying J. Yet the Southern California scores was a modest prelude to the job in Lebec. The men who allegedly traveled to truck stops and other locations, including some far away, to identify the raw and rob, steal, and unlawfully take and unlawfully carry away a variety of merchandise. According to the indictment, the defendants used multiple vehicles to follow trucks carrying shipments of electronics and other items until they reached stopping points. Then the indictment said the alleged thieves would rob or burgle the vehicles. The men charged in the indictment would then return to LA County with the merchandise to divide up and fence for profit. And they go through some other heists that they've done in Ontario, California. They stole a box of Apple AirTags when a driver stopped for food in Fontana. So this is kind of what we didn't know about all of this. When I first talked about this, because this kind of stuff catches my attention. It's not disappearances, but catches my attention. You look at it and you say, man, this is really, really unique. But it's kind of not, in that these guys had pulled off a bunch of smaller jobs similar to this before this one. And it very well may be that even in the process of doing it, they didn't realize, how much was really going to be in this heist, because it was so much bigger than these other ones. For example, the one in Fontana, it was only $57,000. The other one was $241,000, a lot of money, but this, I've already gone through how much this jewelry was all worth. Way, 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 way more than that. And we have to think that it's very possible that it was such a big deal that, they might not have been, the stuff was so hot that they might not have been able to get rid of some of it. And it very well may be out there in a storage unit or something right now. Sometimes the alleged thieves weren't successful. On May 25th of 2022, so just a couple months before the big one, Menstaza, Padilla, Lugo, Valencia, Alban, and others allegedly drove to a truck stop in Fontana to steal from a vehicle there. The men used a crowbar to break in, but fled before taking anything. Still that same day, those same guys found another target in Fontana, allegedly stealing Samsung electronics valued at a little more than $14,000. So really, for the most part, these are small-time guys. And then they happened upon this big one. They took merchandise from a parked semi-truck, the same sort of vehicle they allegedly broke into Lebec 6 weeks later. So that is the article. So these guys are caught. Are they going to plead guilty? Are they going to go to trial? It does seem, at least according to the LA Times, that they have a lot of proof against these guys. At least nobody got killed. At least nobody was injured, and it wasn't violent. They didn't have to stick a gun in anybody's face. And that may just be enough to keep them out of jail for the rest of their lives. I don't know, what technically the time would be for something like this. But you do have to wonder, though, what would have happened if the Brinks driver would have come out. Because remember, the Brinks drivers, all those guys, if you've ever seen them, they all carry guns. And it could have probably gotten ugly real fast. And even though there were two Brinks drivers, they would have been outmanned. It's obvious to me, I guess there were at least 4 guys involved in that heist. Were they carrying guns? I don't know. But if they were, that could have been a huge gun battle right there in that truck stop. And who knows who would have gotten hit and killed, a lot of innocent bystanders. Who knows? So maybe if the heist had to happen, this is probably the best outcome. Nobody got hurt, and they got away, and now it seems like the right guys have been caught, and now it just has to figure out these guys going to go to jail and for how long, and then the jewelers themselves have to work out a deal with the insurance companies. And I have to tell you, I can't say at this point that I'm exactly on the jeweler's side. If you're going to be cheap and you're going to lie about the values of your possessions, then you got to live with that. I know it sucks, but that's how insurance works. Derek, Buttonwillow, California, that town was one of the last places where Bryce Lapizzo was last seen before he went missing. Interesting, Derek. Rockford, while the heist is something, but you worked a Point Break and Les Hugo into the same story. Find me another true crime show that can do that. Yes. Johnny, Utah. Yes. If anybody doesn't know, when I said the FBI LA field office, if you know the movie Point Break, of course, Keanu Reeves was in that movie. He's an FBI agent, and he was at the LA office, and his character's name was Johnny Utah. It's not even a guilty pleasure movie. That is a movie that I will easily admit to loving. And I can remember in college, somebody had a VHS copy of that movie. I did not see that movie in the theater when it came out, but somebody had a VHS copy of that movie when I went to Grove City, and I must have watched that movie 50 times, over 30 years ago. And I do have it on DVD, and it's on one of the streaming services that I have, and it's still a fascinating movie to me. But yes, and Victor Hugo, yes, Les Mis, Rockford, Les Mis. Amy says great flick about Point Break. So if you're wondering where that came from, when they talk about the LA FBI's LA field office, that's in Point Break. So why did I get this wrong? I'm never afraid to admit when I get things wrong. Of course, very recently with the Shanna Boydo disappearance, I admitted that I got that one wrong. Still kind of say if we'd have featured it more recently, like within the last few years, I think I would have gotten it right. But this was a heist that I thought was an inside job. And I think if it were, it would already be known by now. I think it would be in these stories. I don't think they'd be bringing out all this information and not actually mentioning, well, we've also discovered that one of the drivers are involved. That guy went inside. These things happen. So why did I get it wrong? I think, well, one of the things I underestimated was the sophistication of it. This was not a situation where those guys were just sitting around in that truck stop waiting for that truck to pull up. And in fact, if it were like that, then it would almost have to be an inside job. That is not what happened. From this story, those guys went to San Mateo with the plan of stealing those jewels somehow. And then, as you heard, they followed that truck. It seems like they were taking turns, like one car was following for a while. So I guess maybe the Brinks drivers are, told, hey, if somebody's following you, really watch out for that. Well, what did they do? That one car would follow for a while, it would pull off, then another one would follow, and then, they kept trading off. So, the Brinks guys didn't know what was actually going on. Very sophisticated. I really don't even know how many times that's ever been done in any sort of robbery or anything else. I'm not saying it's never happened, but it sounds unusual to me. So they were scoping this out. In addition, they followed it, taking turns. Then something else I think that was sophisticated is that they were patient enough to wait. It very could have easily been that as soon as that truck pulled in, wherever it pulled in, bam, they're on it. They get the Brinks guys. Hopefully they don't kill them, but handcuff them or something and get in there. They were patient enough to wait. And they figured, well, this guy has to pull in at some time to go to the bathroom or eat or whatever else. And that's when we'll act. And then on top of that, they got a little lucky. I mean, what happens if that driver only goes in for 5 minutes? He comes back out. I mean, what are they going to do? They got lucky in the fact that, he went in there. It's 27 minutes, unusual time to eat. No, it's not. I'm sure those guys are entitled to their breaks too. And if the one guy wants to take a break by sleeping in the truck, that's fine. So I think overall, I just underestimated the sophistication. And of course, what I don't think any of the people in the public knew is that this crime was part of what we would call a larger crime spree. And actually, my opinion is that because it was part of a larger crime spree, that's what got them caught. As you heard from the article, this big heist had a lot of similarities to all of these other smaller heists. And I think that's what the FBI, how they put it all together. Well, yeah, this one's a big one, and it's a lot more money, a lot more valuables than all these others. But other than that, man, it seems similar. And so they start maybe going back through and can they connect anybody and, to each of these. And it seems they could. And of course, the FBI has specialists, they have bank heist specialists. They don't have any disappearance specialists, but they do have bank heist specialists. It's a big deal. And bank heists, for the most part, are considered to be federal crimes because of banks. Even though you have private banks, they're federally insured. That's what FDIC is, and so that's why the federal government, the FBI, can get involved. Do local police departments get involved? Sheriff's office, state police? Yes, they assist, and certainly when it comes to the local hubbub. If there's a bank heist, the FBI is probably not going to know about anything that's going on locally, but who would? The local police. Well, we had a thing go on at this bank before. This is not maybe something the FBI would know. So local law enforcement can give kind of the local knowledge. Maybe the local law enforcement in this situation would be able to give an idea about, well, what really goes down at this truck stop? Is it a dangerous spot? Has anything been stolen from here before? On and on and on and on and on. Is it common for trucks to park in this area? Things that the FBI would probably not know, because given that both of my brothers were truck drivers, and having rode with my brother Brian, quite a bit in his truck from like 98 through 2000, 2001, when he'd come through Las Vegas, you see a lot. You see a lot driving a truck around the Southwest United States. And a lot of, scary and adult things go on at truck stops at 3 a.m, let's just say. So that would also probably be something. And because of that, I'm sure a lot of cops get called to truck stops for this, that, and the other. A lot of prostitution happens in truck stops. And so the local cops would probably know, well, here's what goes on at this Flying J. So I think that's why I got this wrong. I think probably why a lot of the public got this wrong. But it does seem to me from early on that the FBI had a very good handle on what happened. And even though it did take 3 years, almost 3 years, it does seem that they got onto this and had a good sense of what had happened here. It was just a matter of putting names to this gang. They probably knew about the gang and knew about all these other heists. They probably just didn't know the names. So we also have to consider that since this in 2022, that these guys probably have pulled off other capers as well. And this is probably also something the FBI was staying on alert for. If we see something like this a couple months from now or a year from now, it's probably the same group, and we'll have to remember that. So fascinating. But you do have to remember there are a lot of big heists that go unsolved forever. One that comes to my mind is the Gardner Museum heist in Boston. What was that? From the late 80s, early 90s, where a bunch of artwork was stolen, valuable artwork, still unsolved. Don't know who did it, even though they actually had the guys on video walking through the museum. Now, granted, it's not that high quality. We have to remember it's over 30 years ago. But they had the guys. It does seem like both guys were wearing disguises and went in there. And it does seem that if you look, I mean, you can even see online like the pattern that they followed going through the museum. It's obvious before they went in there, they had already decided what artwork they were going to take. They passed up certain valuable artwork to go for other artwork. So this was pre-planned. This was not a couple punks going in there and just ripping stuff off the walls. It was not that. So, but this is still unsolved. And that one, even though, the way I remember it is that there were two, were they college students or something, like doing part-time jobs, working there at night or something like that, working there. And of course, the odds of them, being an inside job with them, none. Even though I think they were looked at. They gave descriptions, but it's, like I said, it's believed now that the descriptions, were disguises. Was it the mob? Could be. Was it just a couple of guys looking to do something on a dare? Could be. Could it be some foreign art collector that paid these guys to go in there and steal them and send them to Europe or something? Could be. And in fact, just to show you how these things can be, there was a story that I read within the last couple years. There was were they married? I think they were. But one, I don't know if they died at the same time or what, but eventually this couple ended up passing away. And an heir or the executor or somebody was going through where they lived. And in one room, there was like this painting. It was it behind a door? It wasn't like hidden, but it wasn't exactly out in the open either. They came across this painting, didn't think much of it. And it turned out eventually that this was a painting that had been stolen years before that. And they were able to finally put it together that these two people who had died, they were the two who did it. Had never broken another law, at least to anybody's knowledge, in their entire lives. But they stole this particular painting from, was it from a school or an art gallery? I don't remember. But this was what maybe makes that kind of theft hard to solve. Because, with jewelry, like what these guys did, they're doing it for their money. They're doing it for their money. It's not something worth stealing it, and then they're going to start giving them off as Christmas presents to the favorite women in their life, their girlfriends, their wives, their mothers, their daughters, sisters, whoever. They're not going to do that. They're going to sell them for the money, and even though we know that can be very dangerous, and but usually before this stuff is done, these people have a pretty good idea of where they're going to get rid of jewelry or watches, things like that. But when it comes to artwork, you find that people steal this stuff just to have it. and really think about it. If somebody you knew stole a valuable piece of art and hung it in their house, and they invited a bunch of people over to their house for a New Year's party, got 20 or 30 people, and that piece of art is sitting there, how many people would really, really know that it was stolen or would recognize that it's from some famous painter, it's worth millions of dollars? Unless it's some specialist, some art critic or somebody, nobody. You can put these paintings in your homes, in your castles, your mansions, your yachts, or whatever else, and people go in there and they don't know the difference. what also, of course, has been done sometimes with art is it's ransom. So they steal a piece of art, which of course is unique. If they destroy it, it's gone. If somebody destroys the Mona Lisa, that's it. But what they can do is they can blackmail, the owner, the museum. I have this piece of artwork. If you don't send me $10 million, I'm going to destroy it. That happens. In addition, what can be done with art is that it can be used as collateral for illegal loans. This is a lot what goes on. As you can tell, I've read up a little bit on this. Like I said, I keep continuing to tell you, no girlfriend, no pets, no kids. I have a lot of time on my hands. When I'm not working on disappearances, do all sorts of reading. But another thing that can be done with artwork is that it can be used as collateral for illegal loans. This is very popular, in the mob. So they steal a piece of art. The guy needs money, so he steals a piece of art, and he takes out a loan, and he gives the piece of art to the person who's giving out the money. So it's a trade. The art does have value, and so that's the collateral. You get this piece of artwork that I stole, I get a loan. Some bookie or something like that. That is also very common, but it's tough. Artwork, hard to track down. Jewelry, not as hard, but if it's diamonds, of course, diamonds, jewelry is unique. Diamonds, not unique. And so, you could sell those and nobody would even know the difference. It's not like stealing a car. It's not like stealing a Rolls Royce where you could put a picture up. This car was stolen. Look for it. You can't do that with diamonds. But you can do that with jewelry because jewelry is somewhat unique. You could do it with art. But like I said, a lot of times when it's artwork, these are not people who are looking to steal it and then sell it. Fascinating. So to me, it's a fascinating topic. And that's why I've read quite a bit about it. Hello, Charlotte. What's going on? Good to see you. Charlotte, I just saw the update on Shanna Boydo a couple days ago. So sad. Yeah, that was an episode. I did a kind of what we might call a revisitation of that, Charlotte, where we went over her disappearance. And of course, I went through, this was one of those that I got wrong. And I went through why I got it wrong, at least at the time. I would continue to insist that if that was a disappearance that we featured a little more into my podcasting career, I think I would have gotten it right. But yeah, I got that wrong. Yes, she was found by accident. No foul play. And then Charlotte says, I remember seeing that on TV. Are you talking about the couple who stole that piece of art and like kept it in their house all those years? Yeah, I'll have to look that up. You could Google it. You can easily find it. It's been a while since I read that story, but my perception of the topic tells me that happens a lot more than we really know. A lot of art, a lot of art enthusiasts out there. I'm not into art. I went to the Dali Museum down in, if you don't know, the Salvador Dali Museum is in St. Pete, Florida. I've been to it. Fascinating. But I'm not into art. I mean, if I were to hit Powerball and I get my big mansion and everything else, there are not going to be high-priced paintings on the walls. I can assure you that is not going to happen. But some people are into that. And of course, most people that are into it can't afford it. But they can afford to steal it and possess it and put it in their bedroom or somewhere and admire it and look at me. And everybody comes over to the house would never know the difference. It just looks like something you could get at Walmart. But to the connoisseur, well, that's a Jackson Pollock. That's a Van Gogh. That's a Monet. To the average person, it's a Bob Ross. The rest of us, we have no idea. Yes, Charlotte. Okay. So let's get to Barry Morphew, Morpheu. Unless you've been living under a rock the last 5 years, you know who he is. He's been charged again with his wife Suzanne's murder. As the news broke that Barry Morphew had been indicted again for the murder of his wife, Suzanne Morphew, it didn't take long for conversations to rip through the small Colorado town of Poncha Springs. At the Poncha Market, a grocery store in Poncha Springs that both Morphews once visited, owner Shan Hall felt the impact immediately. This was a long time coming, Hall said, 5 years. Tisha Leeway felt it too. She's hosted remembrance ceremonies for Suzanne every year since 2020. And on Friday, so just a couple days ago, she made the 2-hour drive from Salida to Alamosa just to be present at the district attorney's press conference. The biggest reason was to make sure that somebody was here to represent Suzanne. I've done it for 5 years. I'm not going to end it now. The 12th Judicial District Attorney announced on Friday that Barry Morphew has been indicted by a grand jury on a charge of first-degree murder after deliberation. The indictment follows the discovery of Suzanne's remains in September of 2023. That's almost 2 years ago now. In a remote part of Saguache County, toxicology reports later revealed animal tranquilizers. I'm not going to read those names because I'm not going to make an idiot of myself in her system. Prosecutors say Barry Morphew had access to the tranquilizers and a tranquilizer rifle, and that telematics data, cell phone activity, and surveillance footage placed him discarding unknown items in trash in the days after Suzanne disappeared. Given what investigators are now saying, Hall says his visit to her store right after Suzanne's disappearance now raises even more questions. Right after she was reported missing, he came knocking on our door, Hall said. He was wanting to go through the dumpster to look for a bike helmet and or clothing, left a note, didn't give a description. Hall says she remembers how strange it all felt at the time. I've always wondered why he came here looking for whatever he claimed he was looking for. Since he was dumpster diving back in Denver, what was he dumping here? Suzanne Morphew was reported missing on Mother's Day 2020, so that's May of 2020. Barry told investigators she had gone for a bike ride while he left early for a job in Broomfield. Her bike and helmet were later found abandoned near their home in Chaffee County. The case drew national attention, but charges filed against Barry in 2021 were later dropped after the previous prosecution team failed to turn over critical evidence. Many feared that would be the end. And you remember there was something that went on in that prosecutor. It was all messed up. The new indictment comes from the 12th Judicial District, where Suzanne's remains were found in 2023. Hall says she's grateful for the shift. So it's 2 different counties that were involved in this. The evidence, they have that to now bring him in. That was the anticipation. That was the when is this going to happen? Hall didn't know Suzanne personally, though her husband remembers Suzanne coming into the store after bike rides. But the news had reopened wounds in Salida, where even those who never knew Suzanne personally held on to her story and hoped for justice. For the most part, we knew her through this. It's amazing that this community pulled together. Leeway agrees. She watched the case unfold from the start, organizing vigils, memorials, and even putting up a Christmas tree each year in Suzanne's memory. There's been about 4 of us that have been really together through the whole thing, and we've all kind of just watched it unravel. The first, trial they went through was a lot, and then it got thrown out, so I think we're now right on track. Let's see. Let's go down here. All right, so that's about all I want to read from that article. It just gets more into their feelings and everything else. Jill says, picked up by my house. So Barry Morphew was down there in Arizona, Jill. I didn't know that. And good to see you, Jill. I hope you're doing well out there. Now, of course, this is not a disappearance. This is an outright murder. From the very moment that Suzanne was found, everybody knew it was a murder. It was just a question of who did it. Many people believe that Barry did it. I have to admit, I was one of those that was a little on the fence. I can tell you that my assistant Cherie and I kind of went back and forth on this many times. It does seem that she is going to get this closer to being right than I am. That's the way it goes sometimes. But what we can learn from this for disappearances is that this is a very good example of what I call the man said type of disappearance. Of course, this is a murder, in which Barry says, I left early. I never saw her again. So let's say Suzanne, she was missing for a while. Of course, her body was eventually found. But let's say even now that her body was never found, but everybody still thought that Barry did it. This is the man said type of disappearance. The reason I call it that is because in this type of disappearance, the guys, it's usually involving a woman, even though we've covered a few where it's a woman saying like the same thing, like Shannon Collins is like the flip of it. The woman said, this is a kind where he just says, well, I don't know what happened. I left, never saw her again. And the story seems to be somewhat thin. In Barry's case, I wouldn't necessarily call the story thin. I would just call it very convenient. I mean, what are the odds that the very morning or whatever that he leaves early to go to this job in Denver, that she goes missing? What are the odds? It happens. I mean, not all wives that die or are murdered by their husbands. I mean, it's a high percentage, but it's certainly not all. And if we start talking about adultery, which it does seem some of that was going on in this marriage, with Suzanne, I think, having some things going on with like some guy from high school. I don't know if they actually had sex or anything, but let's just say probably some things that a married woman shouldn't be doing. And then also with Barry himself, things as a married man he shouldn't have been doing. Maybe this all, kind of starts to look like, well, what's going on here? Is this really, did she really disappear on her own? Was she really out riding her bike and somebody came along and took her, or was it something else? Now, so then we go to, well, how many of the man said disappearances have we featured on Unfound that are still unsolved? Many, 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 most of them. Well, then why have those guys gotten away with it, but Barry didn't? That's something I think we're going to need to know more if a trial happens, if he doesn't plead guilty or whatever happens. That is something that is going to take more analysis when we get the information that are surely the facts on this particular murder. Of course, in an Unfound scenario, when I have a guest on, a family member of that missing woman, we get as deep down into the details as we can. Whether it had to do, like maybe the best example is Angela Green and what her husband said after she went missing. So it's just hard to say. The best guesses I can make right now is that I'm going to almost guarantee that none of those disappearances that we've featured on Unfound that are the man said type had anything to do with a tranquilizer gun. Pretty sure. Because when you do that, you bring in as what might get Barry convicted. Of course, she eventually was found. They checked her blood. Well, she had these tranquilizer drugs in her. Well, guess what? They figure out that he had a gun and everything. I mean, it all then comes together. It's boom, 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 boom. Shouldn't have done that. That was on Barry's part. That was a bad choice to get away with a murder. Bad choice. Instead, my best insight on this is that most of these women who disappear under similar circumstances that we feature on Unfound, I'm not sure a weapon was used at all. A gun or a knife. You have to remember, these things can be very messy, and it very well may be the reason they chose that. He didn't just pick an outright gun with bullets because it gets messy. A tranquilizer gun, you shoot somebody and the person eventually, of course, it's going to take a while. I mean, if you've ever watched National Geographic, when they go out there and, they tranquilize like a lion or something. It's not like they shoot the lion and in like a minute, the lion's out. It takes a little while. So, not seems like a lot of work, but this is what was done. My impression, though, when we talk about the man-said type of disappearances on Unfound, is I think a lot of these women are strangled. You can strangle a person without needing a weapon. Of course, you can use a weapon like a wire or a chain or something like that. But a lot of times, the human hands are good enough or bad enough, however you want to look at it. And the thing about that is, of course, it's not messy. If when the woman is disposed of, however time it's say there's a hole dug somewhere, even if they come across the remains, it's probably going to be somewhat difficult to determine how that woman died. I know they talk about the hyoid bone that gets damaged when a person gets choked, but is that 100% of the time? No. It's not messy, and that's why I tend to lean in that direction. Certainly, some of these women could be drugged, and if they're not found for a long enough time, then yes, not if they're missing long enough, then yes, those drugs, no autopsy would be able to prove anything. And that kind of takes me to the other side of this. Let's just admit it. The reason Barry got charged again is because she was eventually found. He just didn't dispose of her body adequately enough. He just didn't. So I think what I'm saying here is that just in general at this point, it just doesn't seem that Barry Morphew was as good a criminal as these guys who we've featured on Unfound. At this point, it's just my perception. A dart gun, the story about leaving early to go to Denver, disposing of her in a place that, was discovered in like 3 years. You have to remember, we've covered the man-said types of disappearances that are unsolved, and the woman hasn't been found for 40 years, 50 years. Suzanne was found in 3. If it had been 30 or 40 years, of course, her body would have decomposed a lot more. I don't know if those drugs could have been found in her system by that time. So he just didn't do a very good job of that. And the other problem about the disposing of a body is that when it's found, inevitably, they're going to be able to connect that area with, the killer, most likely the husband. I don't know, once again, I don't know all of this as well as many of you. I know many of you have followed this from day one, every day, everything going on. But it's one of those things, I'm not here to give advice on how people get away with crimes. They can figure that out all on their own. But this is how we learn that I think what we've learned is that there's only a couple good ways to get rid of bodies that, can last. Of course, like with, Dennis Bowman killing his daughter, Andrea, what did he do? Put her in the backyard. And that works as long as you live on that property. And the only thing that got him caught was what? Them proving that he he had murdered a woman back in 1980. If he had not done that, I think Andrea is still missing. So burying her in the backyard would have been a good choice otherwise. Like was with Carlos Rodriguez. He put Zoe Campos in her backyard, in his backyard. Police initially walked right over where she was buried. And if he had not raped or whatever, sexually assaulted or whatever it was 5 years later after Zoe, guess what? She's probably still missing too. So perception wise, as long as these guys don't commit any other crimes, my perception is putting a body on your own property is a good choice. And the other thing about putting it on your own property is the police need warrants to go on there to search, and those are hard to get. But what Barry did was a bad choice. And we have to think, once again, not knowing the case as well as some of you, let's say he had buried her in the backyard. It does seem that this case got enough attention. Maybe that wouldn't have worked. Maybe not. But let's say instead that he would have put her in a garbage bin somewhere. What are the odds of her being found? I don't think very good. So Barry, just like I said, perception-wise at this point, just made, I think, some questionable decisions. The method of death, putting her where he did, his story, not the best choices. Like I said, I'm glad he got caught. If he did this, I'm glad he got caught. But this is how we get a better handle on all of these other unsolved ones. What can we learn for Barry seemingly murdering Suzanne? And how can we apply it to all of these disappearances that we've learned about on Unfound that seem to have similar circumstances? Guy says, I don't know what happened to my wife. She was here. I got up. She's gone. She got in a truck and took off. I don't know who was driving. I took her to a psychiatric hospital. I don't know what happened from there. Oh, she died in the hospital. No, I don't have a death certificate. All of these different stories that we've heard. Let's see what everybody is saying about all of this. Where is Cherie nowadays? Well, Cherie was over in England for her son, not her son's, her brother's marriage. And she's just gotten back. She sent me a picture of the wedding party and everything. Yeah, she got to go to England for a wedding. That was pretty cool. Jill says, it isn't clear why Barry Morphew was living in the Phoenix area. He had an address at the Stardust Trailer Park in Cave Creek. Wow, okay. Jill says he was picked up 49 minutes later east of Cave Creek. Suspicious. Derek, to get away with murder, the killer asked about 1,000. Morphew messed up, I guess. Rockford says there are a lot of luck in your man said cases too. I'd say that's what differentiates them from the slam dunks and the Morphew cases and into that small club of unsolved disappearances. Luck, bad luck, I guess, for us. Good luck for the killer, Rockford. Yeah. There's certainly that wiggle room. Of course, what I would say, Rockford, is the reason, there does seem to be a lot of luck with these guys getting away. My perception, too often police believe the stories. They show up, a family member, a sister of the wife says, hey, I haven't heard from my wife for a week. The husband's telling a strange story. I don't believe him. You got to figure this out. The cops show up. He answers up at the door and says, yeah, she left. What do you want me to do? She's an adult. Yeah, she took off. Yeah. We were having problems. We had an argument. She took off. And I think, like I said, I think too often police believe that. Now, do women leave their husbands and without telling them? Yeah, a lot of women do that every day, and probably the guys deserve it. But police just have to be a little more instinctive than that. If you're getting calls from, the wife's family that they haven't heard from, and then they show up, the guy says, I don't know what happened to her. I mean, come on. But I think that we've shown over the past 9 years how many times police just go along with it. And even with Carlos Rodriguez, even when they don't go along with it, they walk right over where, Zoe Campus's body was. I mean, that's bad. It's luck. But I wonder, Rockford, if it's good luck for the killer because the police just, they're kind of doing a half-assed job because they kind of believe the guy, but they probably, it's one of those things, well, we did get caught in this. We have to do it. but they're inclined to believe the guy. All right, we'll walk through the yard and la 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 la, and then they're gone. I think a lot of that goes on, and we're never going to, no police officer's ever going to own up to that. Never, ever. But I think that's what goes on because it happens so often. We start talking about luck. D, just I can't believe he did that and thinking she would not be found. How did they find her? Somebody, I don't remember. It's not in the article, D. I don't remember specifically how they find her. Leaving a body makes a statement. Hiding is proof of burden. Rockford agreed. Other law enforcement either believes it or doesn't want to deal with it. They write it off as a domestic, and that's that. Rockford, as I've said before, maybe not recently, and I don't know how many times I've said this publicly, at least once, but not a lot, that my problem, just as a guy, as a straight guy in the United States, and at 54 years old, I think one of the problems is that these police officers, who are mostly men, show up and listen to this husband sob story, and these police officers identify with this guy a little too much. The guy starts saying, well, she just took off. She said I was controlling. She said I, wasn't letting her grow. She said all these things. And we had an argument. And all, what these police officers start saying? I know what you mean, man. And they start sympathizing with the guy. I really believe that happens. That hurts investigations. Whereas if I were to tell you, if these were more women police officers showing up and the guy's saying that, I think women police officers would have a much better instinct is, this sounds like crap. Pretty sure. Pretty sure. Too many, a lot of guys have great relationships. These we're talking, and I realize this happens with gay relationships. I'm not trying to stereotype. We know this happens in gay relationships too. But just when we talk about men and women going missing and the guys in life saying, I don't know. A lot of guys are in great relationships, but then there are the ones who aren't. And some of those show up for these calls and, and suddenly the guys tell them, and they suddenly become like a like mind. Oh yeah, I know what you mean, man. My girlfriend, she's exactly the same way. And they forget that they're supposed to be there about a disappearance and the guy might have killed a woman. I'm sure that there's no doubt in my mind that happens a lot. Perception, no proof. But it happens so much that these guys get believed that there's something going on there. So there's that. So Barry Morphew, seemed like they got him dead to rights, but we take a deal, we'll go to trial. I don't know. I'm wondering, as I sit here, I'm wondering, of course his daughters were very, 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 very much behind him. I wonder what they're thinking now. I wonder. One thing I didn't do was go through the poll for this past week. Of course, we covered the disappearance of Matthew Tuttle, where he had his mother and two of his sisters. I thought they all did fantastic jobs tonight, or last Friday. And I asked the very simple question: was Matthew Tuttle walking off a spur of the moment decision, or was it something that he planned in jail? Of the repliers, the people who took part in the poll in the discussion group, 77% said Matthew Tuttle walking off was a spur of the moment decision. Only 23% thought it was planned. In the discussion group, or in the think tank, it was mixed. Let's just put it that way. The think tank, which is, of course, every Sunday night, patreon.com/Unfound podcast. Sign up there if you'd like to take part. It was a little more mixed than that, a little more questionable. But I will tell you, for the blog that I wrote at patreon.com/Unfound podcast, once again, I came to the decision that it was also a spur of the moment decision, that something went on once he got home that he decided to walk away. Now, did he on the spur of the moment decide to commit suicide, or did he decide to walk to some other person's apartment in the complex? Did he decide to go down to the river, to the Mississippi River that was right there, to go swimming to cool off and floated away? I personally think it was that, but it's open to at least a little bit of interpretation. But I'm with the 77% on this particular poll that it was a spur of the moment decision, despite him talking about wanting to blow his head off when I was in jail and being, but it very well could be that the anger that he displayed by this friend, who I'm inclined to believe, certainly played a big role in whatever happened when he got home. I can tell you this, at least in the think tank, although we talked about foul play, it was not a popular choice. This is not, I think, a disappearance where foul play is very likely. Just like last week was Keith Schmidt. Once again, it's not one that I think that foul play is very likely. Those two, what was interesting is Keith Schmidt was involved in flooring and carpeting, everything. So was Matthew Tuttle. What are the odds? Certainly similar in some ways, but certainly different than others. D, I have one more question. Do you know the person who dropped off or dropped him off? For Matthew Tuttle, I don't think I ever got the name. Maybe I did get the name when I originally talked to Amy, but I did not put it in my notes, D, so I don't know who the person was. It was one of those things where, they just thought that, no, this guy, trustworthy, not like Matthew, was not a drinker, and just a longtime friend was trying to help him out, suspecting that he had anything to do with the disappearance. And so she probably mentioned his name in a prior conversation, but I didn't write it down. So we got 3 minutes. So what are we doing this Friday? I am doing an interview supposed to happen on Wednesday. I really, really believe it's going to happen. We are going to have another author on the podcast. I think the last one we had was for the disappearance of Brianna Maitland. But I'm going to have the author of this book. I'm going to interview him, like I said, on Wednesday. I think it's going to happen. It'll come out Friday. This is the book right here. Vanished in the Pacific Northwest. The mysterious true story of 4 women who vanished without a trace, written by Doug Eastwood. I got this book on Saturday. I've already read it and taken the notes. Hey, I'm serious. Even at my dad's, I was able to get this all done. I'm going to be interviewing this author. Now, it's going to be a little bit of a review of at least one disappearance that we majorly covered a few years ago, that being Julie Weflin. She is one of the 4 women. The other women are Deborah Swanson, who we talked also during the Julie Weflin episode. Also, Kathy Gregory, who also got mentioned. But there will be a new one, her name being Sally Stone. All 4 of their disappearances are covered in this book. I think this book's pretty good. Or I wouldn't be, of course, interviewing the author. But I wanted to do this because we are at least going to cover one new disappearance, Sally Stone. But we're going to get a little bit of a different point of view on those other 3. Remember with John Paulos, like John, good guy. We need more John Pauloses in the world. But the issue is that John's really fixed on this idea that Bill Hicks, is that his name? William Hicks, murdered Kathy, Deborah, and Julie. I think that I've been public. I don't think that happened. So we're going to give it another shot with Doug. I think Doug knows John, has talked to John. I don't know if they've met, but we're going to get a little bit of a different point of view, being that Doug has put so much work into those disappearances, not put as much work into any one of those disappearances as John has put into Julie's. But my opinion is that Doug has a little better handle on all 4 of them. So you're going to hear what Doug has to say on Friday. As is usually the case, we'll go over a little bit for each disappearance, but I'm hoping we give you enough of it, of a bite at it, that you all go out and order his book from Amazon.com. So that's what we're doing Friday. And that's all I got for tonight. Man, does 2 hours go fast or what? That's all I got. Thank you all for showing up tonight. Once again, give this show tonight a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel. Consider supporting Unfound through Patreon or YouTube, wherever you'd like. And keep your heads on swivels out there. Be aware of your surroundings. And Charlie, say hi to the kids for me. What Drug, the console has done some good work on Pacific Northwest cases too. I know, I listened to it. And I'll be up there, so timing is perfect. Done just for you, Rockford. And he says, good night, Adam Green. Okay. Good night, everybody. Once again, Charlie, say hi to the kids for me. I'll say hi to your mother and your uncle tomorrow for you. Good night.